This soccer mom just made the biggest mistake of her life. She walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with a smile on her face, designer purse on her arm, and absolute confidence that she'd already won. She'd been bragging for weeks, posting on Facebook about her easy victory, telling everyone at the PTA meeting how she was about to get $5,000 from some careless driver who destroyed her precious SUV. She even rehearsed her tears. Big mistake, because Judge Judy had something Karen didn't know about. Security footage. 23 minutes of crystal clear high-definition video that would expose every single lie this woman was about to tell. What happened next didn't just end her case. It ended her entire reputation, her position in the community, and turned her into the most hated Karen on the internet. Smash that like button right now because you're about to witness the most devastating courtroom destruction in Judge Judy history. This overconfident soccer mom thought she could waltz into America's toughest courtroom and lie her way to a payday. She thought her polished appearance, her practiced story, and her fake tears would be enough. She was dead wrong. When you walk into Judge Judy's courtroom with a fabricated story, you better pray there are no cameras. But here's what Karen didn't know. The parking lot where this accident supposedly happened, it had 6 security cameras. Every angle, every moment, every lie, all recorded. Judge Judy had watched the footage 3 times before Karen even walked through that door. She knew the truth. She knew Karen was lying, and she was about to destroy this woman on national television in front of millions of viewers. This isn't just another Judge Judy case. This is the case that proves why you should never ever lie in a courtroom, because the truth always has receipts, and Judge Judy always checks the footage. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. This is the day America watched a so-called pillar of the community get exposed as a complete fraud on national television. It was a typical Tuesday morning at Judge Judy's Los Angeles courtroom. The cameras were rolling. The audience was seated. Another day, another case. But what happened in courtroom 4A would become the most viral Judge Judy moment of the entire year. A clip that would rack up over 70 million views across every platform. A moment that would spark a national conversation about privilege, lying, and accountability. The case seemed simple on paper. Karen Mitchell, a 42-year-old suburban mother of 3, was suing Jessica Rodriguez for $5,000. The claim: Jessica had recklessly backed her vehicle into Karen's luxury SUV in a grocery store parking lot, causing significant damage to the driver's side door and front panel. Karen was demanding full compensation for repairs, plus additional money for her time, her stress, and what she called the emotional trauma of dealing with dishonest people. On the surface, it looked like a standard fender-bender dispute. But this was anything but standard. Karen Mitchell wasn't just any soccer mom. She was the president of Riverside Elementary's PTA. She ran the Neighborhood Watch program in her gated community. She organized the annual charity bake sale. She posted inspirational quotes about integrity and honesty on her Facebook page every single morning. She drove an $80,000 white Cadillac Escalade with a stick figure family decal on the back window. She wore designer athleisure to school pickup. She had opinions about everything and made sure everyone knew them. In her world, she was untouchable, respected, important. Someone whose word meant something, and she was absolutely convinced she was about to win this case. For 3 weeks leading up to the court date, Karen had been telling everyone who would listen about her guaranteed victory. At her book club meeting, she'd rolled her eyes and said, "This woman thinks she can just deny it and get away with it. Please, Judge Judy will see right through her." At her hot yoga class, she'd complained loudly in the locker room about how much time this was taking away from her busy schedule, but that it would all be worth it when she got her check. On Facebook, she'd posted a cryptic status. "Some people think they can damage other people's property and just lie about it. Can't wait to see justice served. Court date tomorrow. Pray for me." 37 of her friends had liked it. 12 had commented with prayer hands emojis and messages of support. Karen had her story down perfectly. She'd practiced it in the mirror. She'd rehearsed which moments to pause for effect, where to let her voice crack with emotion, when to dab at her eyes. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. A tasteful navy blue dress, pearl earrings, minimal makeup to look sincere and trustworthy. She'd even prepared her purse, making sure to bring the folder with photos of the damage, printed in color on heavy cardstock to look professional. On the other side of this case stood Jessica Rodriguez, 28 years old, single mother of 2 young kids, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Her morning shift at a medical office, her evening shift waiting tables at a chain restaurant. Jessica drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. She couldn't afford to fix her own car, let alone pay for damage to someone else's luxury SUV. When Karen had confronted her in that parking lot 3 weeks ago, Jessica had been terrified. This angry woman in expensive sunglasses was screaming at her, blocking her car, threatening to call the police, threatening to sue, demanding insurance information. Jessica kept saying she didn't do it, that she wasn't even parked near the Escalade, but Karen wouldn't listen. Other shoppers were starting to stare. Jessica's kids were crying in the back seat. She had 15 minutes to get to her second job or she'd lose it. So she'd done what seemed like the only option at the time. She'd nodded, apologized, said maybe she didn't see it, given Karen her insurance information, and driven away with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. For 3 weeks, Jessica had barely slept. The insurance company had called. They were investigating. Karen was demanding $5,000. Jessica didn't have $500. She'd borrowed money from her sister just to take the day off work to appear in court. She'd thought about not showing up at all, just letting Karen win by default, but her sister had convinced her to fight. Tell the truth, her sister had said. Maybe the judge will believe you. But Jessica wasn't optimistic. She looked at Karen sitting confidently across the courtroom aisle, designer purse in her lap, and felt that same fear from the parking lot. How could anyone believe her word over this polished, put-together woman? Jessica was wearing her one good outfit from Ross Dress for Less. Her shoes were scuffed. She couldn't afford a lawyer. She barely understood how small claims court worked. What neither of them knew was that Judge Judy had already made 3 phone calls before this case, one to the grocery store manager, one to the store's security company, and one to her own production team's investigator. Judge Judy Scheindlin had been presiding over cases for over 40 years. She could smell a lie from across the courtroom, and something about Karen Mitchell's claim had set off every alarm bell in her experienced mind. So she'd done what she always did when something didn't add up. She'd gotten the footage. All of it, every camera angle, the entire timeline. And what she'd seen on those security videos had made her lean back in her chair and smile that knowing smile, the smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Karen Mitchell thought she was walking into an easy victory. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. The bailiff called the case. Mitchell versus Rodriguez. Both parties approached the bench. Karen walked with her head high, her heels clicking confidently against the courtroom floor. She placed her expensive leather folder on the podium like she was presenting a business proposal to a boardroom. Jessica shuffled forward nervously, clutching a wrinkled manila envelope, her eyes darting between Judge Judy and Karen. Judge Judy looked up from her notes, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is your case. Tell me what happened." Karen took a deep breath and the performance began. "Your Honor, thank you so much for seeing us today. On September 14th, I parked my vehicle at Riverside Marketplace to run in for some groceries. I was only inside for about 15 minutes. When I came back out to my car, I was absolutely shocked to discover a huge dent and deep scratches all down the driver's side." She paused for effect, her hand moving to her chest. "My car is my pride and joy, Your Honor. I take such good care of it." I was devastated. Judge Judy said nothing, just watched. Karen continued gaining momentum. I immediately looked around the parking lot to see if anyone was still there. And I saw her. She pointed dramatically at Jessica. The defendant was loading groceries into her car. There were witnesses who told me they'd seen her backing out recklessly. She'd hit my vehicle and was trying to leave the scene without taking responsibility. "What witnesses?" Judge Judy asked flatly. "Other shoppers, Your Honor. They approached me and told me what they'd seen. That's when I confronted the defendant." Karen's voice took on a righteous tone. At first she completely denied it. She said she didn't do anything. But when I pressed her, when I told her about the witnesses, she finally admitted it. She apologized and gave me her insurance information. Jessica shook her head quietly beside her but said nothing. Karen pulled photos from her folder with a flourish. "I have pictures of the damage, Your Honor. As you can see, it's extensive. The entire door panel is scraped. There's a significant dent. The estimate for repairs came to $4,800. But I'm also asking for compensation for my time dealing with this situation, and frankly, for the emotional distress of being lied to repeatedly by someone who damaged my property and tried to flee." She set the photos down like evidence in a murder trial, then looked directly at Judge Judy, with what she clearly thought was a woman-to-woman understanding. "Your Honor, I'm a mother. I teach my children to take responsibility for their actions, to tell the truth, to do the right thing. And I just cannot understand how someone can damage another person's property and then lie about it to avoid consequences. It's wrong. And I'm here today seeking justice." The courtroom was silent. Karen folded her hands, satisfied with her presentation. She delivered every line perfectly, hit every emotional note, shown the right amount of hurt mixed with moral superiority. In her mind, this was already over. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, let's hear your side. Jessica's voice trembled as she spoke. Your Honor, I didn't hit her car. I wasn't even parked near her. I was on the complete opposite side of the parking lot. I swear I'm telling the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. She came at me so aggressively, yelling and threatening to call the cops. My kids were crying. I had to get to work. I just wanted her to leave me alone, so I nodded. But I didn't do it. I promise I didn't do it. Karen let out an audible sigh and shook her head dramatically. She whispered loudly enough for the microphone to catch. Unbelievable. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. She leaned back in her chair, studying Karen with that legendary stare that had made liars squirm for 4 decades. Mrs. Mitchell, you seem very confident in your version of events. I am confident, Your Honor. Because I'm telling the truth, Karen replied with a practiced smile. Good, Judge Judy said, her voice taking on an edge. Because when this case came across my desk, something bothered me. Your story was very detailed. Very polished. Almost too perfect, she paused. So I did what I always do when something doesn't smell right. I investigated. Karen's smile flickered for just a second. Judge Judy reached beside her bench and held up a disc. This is security footage from Riverside Marketplace. Multiple cameras. Multiple angles. The entire incident you've described. She looked directly at Karen. Would you like to see what really happened that day? The color began draining from Karen's face. Well, Your Honor, of course the footage will show. Let's roll it. Judge Judy cut her off. The courtroom monitors flickered to life. The timestamp read September 14th, 9:47 a.m. The footage showed the parking lot from an overhead angle. Karen's white Escalade pulled into a spot near the store entrance. The camera angle was crystal clear. Judge Judy froze the frame. Mrs. Mitchell, is that your vehicle? Yes, Your Honor, but look at the driver's side door. Judge Judy zoomed in on the image. The entire courtroom could see it. The dent, the scratches, already there. Already visible on Karen's car before she even stepped out of it. The damage was there when she arrived. Jessica gasped. Oh my God. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That must be a different, maybe the angle. Judge Judy wasn't finished. Let's continue watching, shall we? The footage rolled forward. It showed Karen getting out of her Escalade, walking into the store. The timestamp jumped ahead. 9:53 a.m. A Honda Civic pulled into a spot on the far side of the lot, at least 75 feet away from Karen's vehicle. Ms. Rodriguez, is that your car? Judge Judy asked. Yes, Your Honor, Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. The footage showed Jessica getting out, grabbing a shopping bag from her trunk, and walking into the store. Her car never moved, never came within 30 feet of the Escalade. Judge Judy paused the video and looked at Karen. Interesting. Your car already had damage. Her car was nowhere near yours. Should we keep watching? Karen's hands were shaking. The courtroom was dead silent. Yes, Judge Judy said coldly. Let's keep watching. The footage continued rolling. 10:17 a.m. Karen emerged from the grocery store, phone pressed to her ear, shopping bags in hand. She walked to her Escalade, opened the door, then suddenly stopped. The camera captured her looking at the driver's side damage as if noticing it for the first time. She walked around the car slowly, examining the dent and scratches that had already been there when she arrived 30 minutes earlier. Then came the moment that would destroy her completely. Karen looked around the parking lot, her head swiveling like a predator searching for prey. The camera caught her eyes landing on Jessica's Honda Civic, still parked, still untouched, still 75 feet away. And then Karen smiled, actually smiled. It was brief but unmistakable, a calculating smile. She pulled out her phone, typed something, then started walking directly toward Jessica's car with purpose. Oh my God, someone in the courtroom audience whispered. The timestamp jumped to 10:21 a.m. Jessica came out of the store. With a single grocery bag, she was heading to her car when Karen intercepted her. The footage had no audio, but body language told the entire story. Karen was animated, pointing at her Escalade, then at Jessica's Civic, gesturing wildly. Jessica looked confused, shaking her head, pointing at where her car was parked. Karen moved closer, aggressive, backing Jessica toward her vehicle. Other shoppers walked by, avoiding the confrontation. Jessica kept shaking her head, clearly trying to leave. Karen blocked her driver's door. Finally, after what appeared to be several minutes of harassment, Jessica's shoulders slumped. She nodded weakly, just once, then quickly got in her car and drove away while Karen stood there with her phone out, looking triumphant. Judge Judy stopped the footage. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Judy began, her voice like ice. Your car was already damaged when you arrived at that parking lot. The defendant's vehicle was never within 25 yards of yours. And what we just watched was you hunting for someone to blame, finding a young woman who looked vulnerable, and intimidating her into accepting responsibility for damage she absolutely did not cause. Karen tried to speak. Your Honor, I can explain. Explain what? Judge Judy's voice rose. Explain how you committed perjury in my courtroom? Explain how you targeted this young mother because you thought she'd be too scared to fight back? Explain how you invented witnesses who don't exist? Explain that smile on your face when you spotted your victim? Smash that like button right now if you believe liars should face consequences, because Judge Judy is about to deliver justice that will restore your faith in the legal system. Your Honor, please? Karen's voice cracked, but this time the tears were real. Tears of panic, not performance. Not only are you not getting your $5,000, Judge Judy declared, you're going to pay her. Judgment for the defendant in the amount of $3,000 for emotional distress, lost wages, and having to defend herself against your fraudulent lawsuit. Karen's legs buckled slightly.
$3,000?
We're not done, Judge Judy continued. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible perjury charges. You lied under oath, Mrs. Mitchell. That's a crime. The episode aired 3 weeks later on a Thursday afternoon. Within 2 hours, it was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Within 6 hours, the clip had 15 million views on YouTube. By the next morning, it had been shared across every social media platform on Earth. Soccer mom Karen had become infamous. The internet is undefeated when it comes to identifying people, and it took less than 48 hours for Karen Mitchell's full identity to spread across social media. Screenshots from her Facebook page circulated everywhere, posts where she'd written about teaching her children integrity, photos of her at PTA meetings, her inspirational quote about honesty from just 2 weeks before the court date. The truth will always come out. Teach your children that lies have consequences. The irony was not lost on anyone. The hashtags multiplied by the hour. Parking lot Karen. Judge Judy justice. Security footage Dontally. Karen exposed. Each one trending globally. TikTok exploded with videos breaking down every second of her lies. Body language experts analyzed the moment she smiled when spotting Jessica's car. That's the smile of someone who just found their mark, one expert explained to 3 million viewers. Psychology professionals discussed predatory behavior and how bullies select victims. Legal commentators debated whether the DA would actually press charges. The memes were ruthless. Karen's face frozen in that moment when the footage started playing. Her eyes wide with realization became an instant classic. When you lie on your resume and they ask you to demonstrate your skills. When you say you're 5 minutes away but you haven't left the house. When the teacher says show your work. The image spread like wildfire, shared millions of times. But the real-world consequences for Karen were far worse than internet mockery. Riverside Elementary's PTA held an emergency meeting. Parents packed the school library, and the vote was unanimous. Karen Mitchell was removed as president effective immediately. We cannot have someone who commits perjury representing our children's education, the vice president announced. The local news covered the meeting. Karen's humiliation was now in her own community, not just online. Her neighborhood watch position disappeared next. The Homeowners Association sent a formal letter requesting her resignation. Trust is essential for this role. Recent events have made your continued participation untenable. Translation: get out. Her neighbors stopped making eye contact. The community Facebook group she'd once dominated with her opinions went silent to her posts. Nobody wanted to be associated with her. The boutique where she worked part-time let her go within a week. We're going in a different direction was the official reason, but everyone knew the truth. Having the most hated woman on the internet working your register was bad for business. Customers had already started complaining. Some had even recorded her at work and posted it online. This is parking lot Karen in her natural habitat, one caption read. The videos got millions of views. Her personal life imploded just as spectacularly. The book club uninvited her. We're taking a break for the holidays, they claimed, but the group continued meeting without her. She saw the photos on Instagram. Her yoga studio friends stopped saving her a spot in class. Her kids came home from school crying because other children were showing them the Judge Judy clip on their phones during lunch. Your mom's a liar became playground ammunition. Her husband, according to sources who spoke to local reporters, was mortified. He'd known nothing about the lawsuit until he saw his wife on national television committing perjury. Friends reported seeing him at a sports bar telling anyone who'd listen, I had no idea. I didn't know she was capable of this. Karen deleted every social media account. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything vanished overnight. But the internet is forever. Screenshots and archives preserved everything. Her old posts about integrity and honesty, now dripping with irony, circulated endlessly. So what can we learn from Karen Mitchell's catastrophic downfall? This isn't just entertainment. This is a masterclass in why lies always collapse under the weight of truth. First, understand that cameras are everywhere now. Every parking lot, every storefront, every intersection, every doorbell on every house. Karen grew up in a world where you could lie and maybe get away with it because it was just your word against someone else's. Those days are over. The truth is being recorded 24/7. Judge Judy knew this. She always checks the footage. Karen gambled that no one would bother. She lost everything on that bet. Second, privilege doesn't protect you from consequences anymore. Karen thought her PTA presidency, her expensive car, her polished appearance would give her automatic credibility. She thought she could bully someone with less money and less status. And initially it worked. Jessica apologized for something she didn't do because she was scared. But Judge Judy's courtroom doesn't care about your designer purse. The only thing that matters is evidence. When you're on the wrong side of the truth, all your privilege does is make the fall more spectacular and public. Third, the internet never forgets. Karen's worst moment will follow her forever. Future employers will Google her name and find this. Her children will carry this burden. 20 years from now, someone will recognize her face. That's the price of lying in the digital age. Your destroyed reputation lives permanently online. And finally, standing up to bullies works. Jessica almost gave up. She was terrified and outmatched. But she told her truth anyway, and justice prevailed. If someone is lying about you, stand firm. Tell your truth. The evidence exists somewhere. This case went viral because we're all tired of watching Karens get away with it. 50 million people watched because they wanted to see accountability, real justice, truth defeating lies. So smash that like button if you believe in holding liars accountable. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because we break down cases where justice actually wins, and trust me, you don't want to miss the next one. Drop a comment about your own Karen story. Judge Judy proved something powerful that day. Cameras don't lie. Evidence doesn't care about your tears. And somewhere someone is always recording. Karen Mitchell learned that the most expensive way possible. Her $5,000 lie cost her everything. Her reputation, her position, her respect, her peace. All gone because she thought she could outsmart the truth. Remember that next time you're tempted to bend reality. In Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, the truth always has the last word. And it's always caught on camera.
The scream tore through the courtroom like a blade through silk, sharp enough to make even the bailiff flinch. "You don't get to talk to me like that." The words didn't just echo off the polished wood paneling and marble columns of Judge Judy's courtroom, they detonated, each syllable dripping with the kind of entitlement that makes your blood simmer. This wasn't a defendant pleading her case. This was a 19-year-old girl named Madison Pierce, standing in front of one of America's most feared judges, screaming like she owned the place. Her finger jabbed toward the bench, her designer nails catching the harsh courtroom lights, her face twisted into a mask of rage that would make a toddler in a toy store look reasonable by comparison. The gallery, packed with observers who'd seen 1,000 cases unfold in this very room, went dead silent. Phones rose like a forest of glass and metal, every single person recording, sensing that something extraordinary was about to detonate right in front of them. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Madison Pierce wasn't just any defendant. She was a viral sensation before she ever stepped foot in this courtroom, a TikTok influencer with 2.3 million followers who'd built her entire brand on what she called standing up for herself. Her videos were a masterclass in manufactured outrage, screaming at retail workers over minor inconveniences, demanding discounts she hadn't earned, throwing drinks at baristas who got her order wrong, all captured in perfect 4K and edited with captions like, "I don't accept disrespect," and "Know your worth, Queens." Her comment sections were a war zone. Half her followers worshipped her as a hero of self-advocacy, the other half despised her as the walking embodiment of everything wrong with her generation. But none of that mattered to Madison. She'd monetized her tantrums into a six-figure income, landed sponsorship deals with questionable brands, and convinced herself that the rules binding ordinary people simply didn't apply to her. And now, standing in Judge Judy's courtroom, she was about to push that delusion to its absolute breaking point. But here's what made this moment so terrifying, so completely unprecedented: Madison wasn't losing. Not yet. In fact, as she stood there screaming, as her voice climbed higher and sharper, something impossible was happening. Judge Judy, the woman who'd spent 4 decades crushing egos and dismantling lies with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a sledgehammer, sat behind her bench in complete silence. Her face was unreadable, frozen in an expression that could have been carved from stone. Her hands rested flat on the mahogany surface in front of her, not reaching for her gavel, not moving to silence the tirade. For the first time in the living memory of everyone in that courtroom, Judge Judy Sheindlin, the judge who'd made grown men cry, who'd eviscerated lawyers with decades of experience, who'd once told a defendant, "I'm smarter than you," and proved it in under 30 seconds, looked like she didn't know what to do. The woman who'd never lost control of her courtroom was watching it slip through her fingers like water. Madison's lawyer, a sweating, pale man named Gerald Pritchard who looked like he'd aged 15 years in the past 15 minutes, sat slumped in his chair with his hand covering his face. He wasn't trying to stop her. He'd given up. Before the cameras started rolling, he'd pulled Madison aside and begged her in a whisper that was somehow both desperate and defeated, "Please, just let me handle this. Don't say anything unless the judge asks you directly. For the love of God, don't make this worse." Madison had looked at him like he'd suggested she cut off her own hand. "Worse? I'm not the one on trial here." That woman, she'd jerked her chin toward the defendant sitting across the aisle, a quiet, exhausted-looking woman in her 40s named Claire Morrison. "She's the criminal. And Judy's going to see that." Pritchard had closed his eyes and prayed to a God he wasn't sure existed anymore. The case itself should have been simple, almost boring by Judge Judy standards. Madison was suing Claire Morrison for $25,000, the maximum allowed in small claims court, claiming emotional distress, lost wages, and what her lawsuit described as permanent psychological damage. The story Madison told was compelling if you didn't look too closely. She'd been working as a promotional model at a pop-up event Claire had organized for her small marketing company. During the event, Madison claimed, Claire had yelled at her in front of customers, calling her lazy and unprofessional, humiliating her so severely that Madison had suffered a complete breakdown. She'd fled the event in tears, Madison said, and spent the next 3 months unable to work, seeing a therapist twice a week, battling anxiety and depression that made it impossible for her to create content or appear in public. She'd brought medical records, therapy bills, and even a letter from a doctor diagnosing her with acute stress disorder. On paper, it looked legitimate. On paper, Claire Morrison looked like a monster who'd destroyed a young woman's mental health over nothing. But Claire's version of events was different. Very different. According to Claire, Madison had shown up 2 hours late to the event, spent most of her time taking selfies instead of promoting the product, and when Claire had politely asked her to focus, Madison had exploded. Not just yelled, exploded. She'd called Claire every name you could think of and a few you couldn't say on television, thrown promotional materials across the room, and stormed out while live-streaming the whole thing to her followers with a caption that read, "Another Karen tries to control me." Claire had the footage. She had witnesses. She had timestamps. And most damning of all, she had Madison's own videos, posted to TikTok just days after the alleged breakdown, showing Madison at clubs, at beaches, at influencer parties, laughing and dancing and showing absolutely zero signs of the crippling anxiety and depression she was now claiming had destroyed her life. Judge Judy had reviewed all of this before the case began. Every document, every video, every piece of evidence from both sides. And anyone who knew Judy, really knew her, could see the signs. The way her jaw was set just a fraction tighter than usual. The way her eyes tracked Madison's every movement with the focus of a predator watching prey. The way her fingers drummed once, twice, 3 times on the bench before going completely still. Judy knew. She'd seen this game before, seen liars and con artists and entitled brats march into her courtroom thinking they could outsmart her. She'd destroyed every single one of them. But Madison Pierce wasn't like the others. Madison had something they didn't have, an audience. 2.3 million followers who would watch every second of this case, who would dissect every word, who would turn Judy into a villain if Madison played this right. And Madison knew it. You could see it in the way she angled her body slightly toward the gallery where phones were recording. In the way she made sure her tears, and yes, there were tears now, perfectly timed, caught the light. In the way every word she screamed was crafted for a clip that would go viral within hours. "I came here for justice," Madison shrieked, her voice cracking at exactly the right moment. "And all you've done is attack me. You haven't listened to anything I've said. You're just like everyone else, you see a young woman standing up for herself and you want to tear her down." The gallery shifted uncomfortably. A few people, mostly younger, probably Madison's fans who'd come to support her, nodded in agreement. One girl whispered loudly enough to be heard, "She's right though." And that's when the impossible became terrifying. Because Judge Judy, the woman who could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow, who'd once stopped a defendant mid-sentence by simply saying, in a tone that could freeze nitrogen, did nothing. She sat there, stone-faced and silent, while Madison Pierce seized control of the courtroom like a hostile takeover. The seconds stretched. 5. 10. 15. The air grew thick with tension, with the horrible anticipation of watching something that shouldn't be possible unfold right in front of you. Claire Morrison sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, her eyes wide with something that looked like horror and disbelief mixed together. This was her life Madison was destroying with these lies, her reputation, her business that she'd spent 15 years building from nothing. And she was watching helplessly as a teenager with a phone and a persecution complex convinced a room full of people that up was down and black was white. Claire's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Vega, leaned over and whispered something, but Claire just shook her head slowly. What could she say? What could anyone say when the entire world seemed to be tilting sideways? Then Madison went for the kill shot. She turned away from Judge Judy, actually turned her back on the judge, which would normally result in an immediate verbal execution, and addressed the gallery directly, her voice dropping from a scream to something softer, more vulnerable, more calculated. "I know what this looks like," she said, and now the tears were flowing freely, mascara tracking down her cheeks in lines that somehow made her look even more sympathetic. "I know you all think I'm just some spoiled girl who can't handle criticism. But you don't know what it's like to have your entire mental health destroyed by someone who has power over you. You don't know what it's like to be gaslit and abused and then told you're the problem." She let out a sob that sounded almost real. "I just wanted to work. I just wanted to do my job." And she, Madison pointed at Claire without even looking at her, she made it her mission to break me. And she did. She broke me. And now everyone's acting like I'm the bad guy for asking for justice. The room was breathing with Madison now. You could feel it. Even some of the people who'd come in skeptical were starting to waver, starting to think maybe, just maybe, this girl was telling the truth. Because she was good. Madison Pierce was very, very good at this. She'd spent years perfecting the art of the performance, of making people believe that her feelings were facts, that her version of reality was the only one that mattered. And in this moment, standing in Judge Judy's courtroom with cameras rolling and the internet watching, she was giving the performance of her life. Judge Judy's gavel sat on the bench within easy reach. She could have ended this with a single crack of wood on wood. She could have eviscerated Madison with a sentence, 2 sentences, torn apart this elaborate fiction and exposed it for exactly what it was. But she didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there with that unreadable expression while Madison Pierce did what no defendant had ever successfully done in her courtroom, took control. And that's when you realized something truly terrifying. Judge Judy wasn't silent because she didn't know what to do. She was silent because she was letting Madison hang herself. Because somewhere in the past 60 seconds, while Madison had been screaming and performing and playing to the cameras, Judy had made a calculation. A choice. She'd decided that destroying Madison quickly would be too merciful. Too easy. Instead, she was going to let Madison think she'd won. Let her get comfortable. Let her believe that her tears and her followers and her carefully crafted victim narrative had actually worked. And then Judy was going to take everything. Not just the case. Everything. Because Judge Judy Sheindlin didn't just win cases, she taught lessons. And Madison Pierce, with her 2.3 million followers and her designer outfits and her absolute certainty that the rules didn't apply to her, was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. The question wasn't whether Madison would lose. The question was how much she would lose. And the answer, which nobody in that courtroom knew yet, which Madison herself couldn't even imagine in her worst nightmares, was simple and absolute: everything. Judge Judy's silence stretched for another 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached for the single manila folder that had been sitting in front of her since the case began. The folder was thin, almost innocent-looking, the kind you'd use for routine paperwork or old receipts. But the way Judy's fingers rested on it, the way she didn't open it immediately, told everyone in that courtroom something critical: whatever was inside that folder was a weapon. Madison, still riding the high of her performance, still convinced she'd seized control, wiped her tears with the back of her hand and sniffled loudly. "I just want what's fair," she said, her voice small and wounded. "That's all I've ever wanted." Judy opened the folder. No dramatic flourish, no announcement, just a quiet flip of the cover that somehow felt louder than Madison's screaming had been. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, held it up to the light as if examining it for the first time, though everyone knew she'd already memorized every word. "Madison," Judy said, and her voice was so calm it was almost gentle. "Almost. I want you to tell me again, very clearly, exactly what happened at Claire's event. Take your time. Be specific." Madison blinked, confusion flickering across her face. This wasn't how judges talked to her when they were losing control. This was something else. Something that made the back of her neck prickle with the first whisper of real fear. But she'd committed to the performance, and backing down now would destroy everything. So Madison took a breath, steadied herself, and launched back into her story. "I showed up on time, ready to work. I was professional, I was focused, I was doing exactly what she hired me to do. And then Claire just started screaming at me in front of everyone, calling me names, telling me I was worthless, that I'd never succeed, that." "Stop." Judy's voice cut through Madison's words like a guillotine blade. Not loud. Not harsh. Just absolute. Madison's mouth hung open mid-sentence. "You showed up on time?" Judy asked. "Yes," Madison said, nodding vigorously. 2 o'clock, exactly when she told me to." Judy nodded slowly, then turned to her clerk. "Please enter Exhibit A into the record." The clerk, a woman who'd worked with Judy long enough to know when something devastating was about to happen, took the paper from Judy's hand and stamped it with practiced efficiency. Judy held up the document so the cameras could see it clearly. "This is the security footage timestamp from the building where Claire's event took place. It shows you arriving at 4:17 p.m. The event started at 2 p.m. You weren't 2 hours late, Madison. You were 2 hours and 17 minutes late." The courtroom inhaled collectively. Madison's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, then recognition, then panic, then a desperate scramble back to indignation. The timestamp must be wrong. Those cameras are never accurate, everyone knows that." Judy held up her hand. Madison stopped talking immediately, some primal instinct finally recognizing the danger she was in. "The timestamp," Judy said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "matches the timestamp on your own Instagram story that you posted from your car, which shows you leaving your apartment at 3:45. With the caption, Judy adjusted her glasses and read from another paper, "Running late, but these brands need to learn to wait for quality." Madison's lawyer, Gerald, made a sound like a man watching his house burn down. In the gallery, Madison's supporters shifted uncomfortably. One of them lowered her phone. Judy wasn't finished. She pulled out another document, this one thicker. "You claim Claire screamed at you, called you worthless, told you you'd never succeed." "Claire," did you say any of those things? Claire Morrison, who'd been silent and terrified up to this point, found her voice. It was shaky but clear. No, Your Honor. I asked her, politely, if she could please stop taking selfies and focus on the customers. That's all I said. Judy turned back to Madison. Do you deny taking selfies during work hours? Madison's jaw tightened. I was documenting the event for my social media. That's part of what influencers do, we promote through our platforms. She should have been grateful. Grateful, Judy repeated, and the way she said the word made it sound like a disease. Let me show you what else you were doing. She pulled out a series of printed screenshots, spreading them across the bench like dealing cards. These are your TikTok videos from the 3 months following this alleged breakdown. The 3 months when you claim you were so traumatized, so psychologically damaged, that you couldn't work or appear in public. She picked up the first screenshot. March 15th, 5 days after the incident. You're at a club in Miami. The caption says, living my best life, haters can stay mad. She picked up another. March 22nd. You're parasailing in Cancun. April 3rd, you're at Coachella. April 18th, you're hosting a meet and greet with fans in Los Angeles. Judy looked up from the photos, her eyes locking onto Madison like a missile finding its target. You know what I don't see in any of these videos, Madison? I don't see someone suffering from acute stress disorder. I don't see depression or anxiety or trauma. I see someone having the time of her life while lying about being destroyed. The courtroom erupted. Not in gasps this time, but in a low, angry murmur. Madison's supporters were silent now, their phones lowered, their faces showing the dawning realization that they'd been conned. Claire Morrison's hands came up to cover her mouth, tears starting to flow, real tears, not performed ones. Her lawyer touched her shoulder gently. Madison stood frozen, her mind racing for an explanation, an excuse, anything that could pull her back from the edge of the cliff she suddenly realized she was standing on. Those videos, I was trying to stay positive, trying to push through. You were scamming, Judy said flatly. You saw an opportunity to get $25,000 from a woman whose only crime was asking you to do your job. So you manufactured a lawsuit, fabricated trauma, and came into my courtroom thinking your followers and your tears would be enough to sell the lie. Judy leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped to something that was somehow more terrifying than any scream could ever be. Here's what you forgot, young lady. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen liars who were smarter than you, more convincing than you, better prepared than you. And I destroyed every single one of them. Did you really think you'd be different? Madison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since she'd entered the courtroom, she had absolutely nothing to say. And in that silence, Judge Judy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who just sprung a trap and was about to watch it snap shut. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds before Madison's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. This is bullshit, she screamed, and this time there was no performance in it, no calculated vulnerability. This was pure, unfiltered panic dressed up as rage. You're twisting everything. You're making me look like some kind of criminal when I'm the victim here. Her voice climbed higher with each word, cracking at the edges, spit flying from her mouth as she gesticulated wildly. Judge Judy didn't move, didn't blink, just watched Madison's meltdown with the detached interest of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. I have rights. Madison shrieked, her designer handbag sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with an expensive thud that nobody noticed. You can't do this to me. I came here for justice and you're attacking me because you're jealous that I have a platform and you're just some old. The gavel came down. Once. The crack of wood on wood was so sharp, so sudden, that Madison actually jumped, her sentence dying mid-word. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with shocked murmurs, went completely silent. Judge Judy set the gavel down with deliberate precision, her eyes never leaving Madison's face. "Sit down," she said quietly. Madison didn't move, frozen in her half-crouched position, breathing hard. "I said sit down, or I will have the bailiff physically place you in that chair." The bailiff, a muscular man who'd been standing near the back wall, took 2 steps forward. Madison sat. Her legs seemed to give out rather than obey, dropping her into the chair with an ungraceful thump. Judy folded her hands on the bench, the picture of controlled fury. "You want to talk about rights? Let's discuss rights. You have the right to remain silent, and given what's about to happen, I'd strongly suggest you exercise it. You have the right to an attorney, though I notice yours is currently contemplating every life choice that led him to this moment." Gerald Pritchard had indeed gone pale, his briefcase already half-packed as if planning his escape. "What you don't have," Judy continued, "is the right to commit perjury in my courtroom." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Perjury. Madison's eyes went wide. "I didn't, I'm not." "You lied under oath," Judy said flatly. "You fabricated medical records, manufactured evidence of psychological trauma, and attempted to defraud Ms. Morrison of $25,000. That's not a civil matter anymore, young lady. That's criminal." She turned to the court clerk. "Please prepare a full transcript of these proceedings for the district attorney's office. I want it delivered before end of business today." The clerk nodded, already typing. Madison made a sound like a wounded animal. "You can't, there's no way, I have a doctor's note." Judy picked up another document from her folder. "You mean this doctor's note? From Dr. Richard Chen?" Madison nodded desperately, grasping at the lifeline. "Dr. Chen's medical license was suspended 8 months ago for fraudulent diagnoses. He's currently under federal investigation for running a prescription pill mill. I called his office yesterday. Want to guess who answered?" Madison's face had gone from flushed red to chalk white. "A DEA agent." The courtroom exploded. Not with murmurs this time but with audible gasps, shocked exclamations, the sound of people turning to their neighbors to confirm they'd heard correctly. Claire Morrison's lawyer shot to her feet. "Your Honor, in light of this evidence, my client would like to file a countersuit for defamation, fraud, legal fees, and emotional distress." Judy nodded. "Granted. We'll address that momentarily." She turned back to Madison, who looked like she might vomit. "Bailiff, please escort Ms. Pierce into custody pending charges." The bailiff's hand closed around Madison's upper arm with professional firmness. She tried to jerk away, but his grip was iron. "Don't touch me." "You can't, I'm calling my dad. He'll sue all of you." Her voice had devolved into something between a shriek and a sob, all traces of her polished influencer persona stripped away to reveal the terrified teenager underneath. The bailiff produced handcuffs from his belt with practiced ease. The metallic click as they locked around Madison's wrists was the only sound in the courtroom besides her hyperventilating gasps. Judge Judy's voice cut through Madison's panic. "Your father can visit you at the county jail. Arraignment will be Monday morning. Until then, you'll have plenty of time to think about the consequences of lying to a judge." Madison twisted in the bailiff's grasp, mascara-stained tears streaming down her face. "This isn't fair. I'm 19. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Judy corrected coldly. "Multiple choices. You chose to lie. You chose to forge documents. You chose to attempt fraud. And you chose to come into my courtroom and double down on every single lie when you had multiple opportunities to tell the truth." The bailiff began guiding Madison toward the side door. She dug her heels into the carpet, looking back at the gallery where her phone-wielding supporters sat in stunned silence. "You're all recording this, right? You see what she's doing to me? This is abuse of power. This is justice," Judy said simply. The door closed behind Madison, cutting off her protests mid-sentence. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. Then Judge Judy turned to Claire Morrison, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Morrison, I apologize that you had to endure this circus." Claire Morrison wiped her eyes with shaking hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Your Honor. I couldn't believe someone would lie like that. My business, my reputation, everything I've built, she almost destroyed it all." Judge Judy nodded gravely. "That's exactly what she intended to do. And that's why we're going to make sure she never gets the opportunity to do it to anyone else." The judge turned to her clerk. "Let the record show that the plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm awarding the defendant, Claire Morrison, the full $25,000 she was falsely sued for, plus an additional $15,000 in punitive damages and legal fees. Total judgment, $40,000, to be paid by Madison Pierce." Gerald Pritchard, who'd been sitting in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Your Honor, my client doesn't have $40,000. Judy's eyebrow arched. "Then she'll get a payment plan. A long one. She'll be reminded of this decision every single month for years." She wasn't finished. "Additionally, I'm ordering a full investigation into Ms. Pierce's social media activities and previous legal settlements." Ms. Morrison's attorney mentioned in her brief that this isn't the first time Ms. Pierce has filed suspicious claims. Patricia Vega, Claire's lawyer, stood immediately. "That's correct, Your Honor. We've identified at least 2 other individuals who settled small claims cases with Ms. Pierce in the past 18 months. Both cases involved similar allegations of emotional distress, both settled quietly for undisclosed amounts." The courtroom buzzed with fresh shock. Judge Judy's jaw tightened. "Get me their names and contact information. If there's a pattern of fraud here, the district attorney needs to know about it. This stops today." She turned to address the gallery directly, something she rarely did. "Let me be very clear for everyone watching, everyone recording, everyone who thinks they can game the legal system the way Ms. Pierce tried to do. The courtroom is not your personal stage. Justice is not a game. And when you lie under oath, when you attempt to destroy innocent people's lives for financial gain, there are consequences. Real consequences." Outside the courthouse, the scene was already chaos. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. Madison's arrest had leaked within minutes, someone in the gallery had posted it to Twitter, and the internet had exploded. Hashtag Madison Pierce was trending worldwide within 20 minutes. But this time, the comments weren't divided. This time, there was no debate. The footage of Madison Pierce being led out of Judge Judy's courtroom in handcuffs became the most watched courtroom clip in internet history, surpassing 40 million views in the first 72 hours alone. But something remarkable happened in those comment sections, in those sharing threads, in those heated discussions across every social media platform. People weren't just entertained. They were learning. The viral moment had sparked a genuine conversation about accountability, about the difference between standing up for yourself and weaponizing victimhood, about the devastating real-world consequences when lies are treated as truth. And therein lay the profound lesson woven through this entire saga. Madison Pierce had built an empire on a simple formula: scream loud enough, cry convincingly enough, and people will believe you're the victim regardless of the facts. She'd monetized outrage, turned manipulation into a business model, and convinced millions of followers that rules were just suggestions for people without enough confidence to break them. For years, it had worked. She'd gotten refunds she didn't deserve, settlements from people too exhausted to fight, sponsorships from brands desperate for her audience. She'd learned that in the court of public opinion, feelings mattered more than facts, and the person who performed victimhood most convincingly usually won. But then she walked into a real courtroom. A place where evidence actually mattered, where timestamps couldn't be edited, where a judge who'd spent 40 years seeing through lies took exactly 12 minutes to dismantle an empire built on manipulation. Madison lost everything not because Judge Judy was cruel, but because justice, real justice, doesn't care about your follower count. It doesn't care how convincingly you cry or how many people believe your version of events. It cares about one thing, the truth. And when you build your entire life on lies, when you hurt innocent people for personal gain, when you look a judge in the eye and double down on fraud, the truth doesn't just defeat you. It obliterates you. 3 weeks after her arrest, Madison Pierce's social media accounts went dark. Not deleted, seized as evidence in her criminal case. Her followers, once numbering in the millions, had already abandoned her in droves. The brands that had sponsored her scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements about not aligning with our values. The 2 previous victims Judge Judy had mentioned came forward publicly, filing their own criminal complaints. The district attorney announced a full investigation into what they were now calling a pattern of systemic fraud. Madison's father, the lawyer she bragged about, released a terse statement saying he would not be representing his daughter and that the family had no comment at this time. Claire Morrison, meanwhile, saw her business boom. The publicity had been traumatic, but the vindication was complete. Orders flooded in from people who wanted to support the woman who'd stood up to a con artist. She hired 2 new employees within a month. When a local news station asked her how she felt about Madison's downfall, Claire's answer was simple: I feel relieved. Not for me, for the next person she would have targeted if someone hadn't stopped her. That's the thing about bullies, about frauds, about people who build their success on hurting others. They don't stop until someone makes them stop. Madison Pierce thought she was untouchable because she'd gotten away with it before, because her youth and her tears and her army of followers had always been enough to avoid real consequences. She thought Judge Judy's courtroom would be just another stage for her performance, another opportunity to manipulate the narrative and walk away richer. She was wrong. Catastrophically, life-alteringly wrong. And the beautiful, terrible poetry of it all is this: Madison destroyed herself. Every lie she told, every piece of fake evidence she presented, every tantrum she threw, it was all recorded, time-stamped, and used against her. She documented her own downfall, posted it for the world to see, and then acted shocked when the world held her accountable. So here's what this story really teaches us. Truth is patient. Justice might be slow, but it's thorough. You can lie to your followers, you can lie to brands, you can even lie to yourself. But when you lie under oath, when you attempt to destroy innocent lives for money, when you look directly into the camera and choose fraud over honesty, eventually, inevitably, you will face someone who won't be manipulated. Someone who's seen your game before. Someone who has the evidence, the authority, and the absolute refusal to let you get away with it. Madison Pierce learned that lesson at 19 years old. She'll spend the next several years paying for it, literally and figuratively. But maybe, just maybe, her spectacular downfall will save the next Claire Morrison from being targeted. Maybe the next influencer considering a fraudulent lawsuit will remember those handcuffs clicking shut and think twice. Maybe someone watching will realize that real strength isn't about screaming the loudest or performing victimhood most convincingly. Real strength is telling the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because at the end of the day, Judge Judy didn't destroy Madison Pierce. Madison destroyed herself. Judy just made sure everyone was watching when it happened. And that 30 seconds of screaming? It cost Madison everything: her freedom, her money, her reputation, her future. All because she forgot one simple truth that every adult should know: actions have consequences. Not sometimes. Not maybe. Always. If this story showed you that truth always wins in the end, then do me a favor right now, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We bring you real courtroom justice that proves no one is above the law, no matter how many followers they have. Share this video with someone who needs to see that accountability still exists in this world. And drop a comment below: do you think Madison got what she deserved, or should the punishment have been even harsher? Your voice matters in this conversation. Thanks for watching until the very end, and remember, the courtroom doesn't care about your performance. It cares about your proof. See you in the next one.
Store Karen tried to ban Judge Judy from the store. 20 minutes later, she was cleaning out her desk. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Boutique, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors where luxury handbags sat like crown jewels, behind gleaming glass displays. It was the kind of place where silence carried weight, where every footstep whispered against imported Italian stone, and where the air itself seemed to cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Judge Judy Scheindlin pushed through the heavy brass doors, the familiar chime announcing her arrival to a world that had no idea it was about to witness something extraordinary. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. She wasn't the Judge Judy the cameras knew. Gone was the black robe that had struck fear into the hearts of litigants for decades. Instead, she wore a simple navy blazer and crisp white blouse, her silver hair catching the afternoon light as she moved with the measured confidence of someone who had spent 30 years making life-altering decisions before most people finished their morning coffee. Her eyes, those legendary eyes that had seen through every lie, every excuse, every attempt at manipulation, scanned the boutique with the same analytical precision she brought to her courtroom. But today, she wasn't looking for deception. She was looking for the perfect gift for her granddaughter's graduation. A simple gesture of love that should have taken 20 minutes and left everyone's day unchanged. The irony was thick enough to cut with a gavel. Here was a woman who had built her career on recognizing character, on seeing through facades and calling out those who abused whatever small power they'd been given. A woman who had made her fortune by refusing to let anyone talk down to her, who had turned respect into a currency more valuable than money. And she was about to walk into a situation that would test every lesson she'd ever taught, every principle she'd ever stood for, in ways she never could have anticipated. Judge Judy's fingers traced the edge of a leather handbag, her mind already calculating quality, craftsmanship, the kind of attention to detail that separated the worthy from the worthless. She'd always believed that how you treated people when you thought no one was watching revealed everything about your character. How you handled power when you thought you were untouchable showed who you really were beneath the uniform, beneath the title, beneath the mask of professionalism. She was about to discover that some people wore their masks so long they forgot there was a face underneath. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone mistakes one of the most powerful judges in America for just another difficult customer, make sure you're subscribed, because this story will show you exactly why assumptions can destroy everything you've worked for in a single moment. Hit that notification bell because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in how respect should never be taken for granted, and why you should never underestimate the quiet person examining merchandise in the corner. The boutique hummed with the kind of manufactured tranquility that expensive stores cultivated. The soft jazz floating from hidden speakers, the gentle whisper of climate control maintaining the perfect temperature for both customers and merchandise. Judge Judy moved through the space like she moved through life, deliberately, purposefully, with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. She paused at a display of silk scarves, her mind drifting to memories of her granddaughter's laugh, the way the young woman's eyes lit up when she talked about her future plans. This should have been simple, a grandmother shopping for someone she loved, a successful woman supporting a business with her patronage, a routine transaction that left everyone satisfied, and the world spinning exactly as it had before. But in the back corner of the store, behind a register that gleamed like a throne, someone was watching, someone whose day was about to take a turn that would make Judge Judy's most dramatic courtroom moments look like a gentle conversation over tea, someone who was about to learn that the person you dismissed today might be the person who holds your tomorrow in their hands. Sharon Kellaway had been watching from her perch, behind the mahogany counter for exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds, her manicured fingers drumming against the leather-bound appointment book like a predator marking time. At 46, Sharon had perfected the art of looking busy while doing nothing, her blonde highlights catching the boutique's carefully orchestrated lighting as her eyes tracked every movement of the woman in the navy blazer. 15 years in retail had taught her to read customers like a poker player reads tells, and everything about this particular shopper screamed trouble to her increasingly paranoid mind. Sharon had built her identity around being the gatekeeper of Meridian Boutique, the final authority between the merchandise and the masses who thought they deserved to touch it. She'd started as a sales associate fresh out of community college, back when she still believed customer service meant serving customers. But years of dealing with returns, complaints, and what she perceived as entitled behavior had calcified her heart into something harder than the diamonds locked in the store's vault. She'd climbed her way to manager not through excellence but through attrition, outlasting colleagues who burned out from her passive-aggressive warfare and her talent for making mountains out of molehills. The woman by the scarves was taking too long, touching too much, examining everything with the kind of scrutiny that Sharon had learned to interpret as either shoplifting reconnaissance or the prelude to an impossible-to-satisfy complaint. Sharon's internal alarm system, finely tuned by years of retail paranoia, was screaming that this customer was going to be a problem. The way she held each item, the way she checked seams and examined labels, the methodical manner in which she moved through the displays, it all spelled trouble in Sharon's narrow worldview. Judge Judy, completely unaware she was being psychoanalyzed by someone whose greatest achievement was implementing a new inventory system, continued her careful examination of a silk scarf that reminded her of her granddaughter's favorite colors. Her fingers traced the delicate pattern, her mind calculating not just the price but the joy it might bring, the memory it might create. She'd learned long ago that the most meaningful gifts weren't always the most expensive, but they were always chosen with intention, with care, with the kind of attention to detail that separated love from obligation. Sharon's patience, never her strongest virtue, finally snapped. She pushed herself away from the counter with the dramatic flair of someone who believed her every movement was being watched and admired, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Her approach was calculated to intimidate, the kind of theatrical authority she'd perfected through years of trying to compensate for feeling powerless in every other aspect of her life. She'd discovered that customers, like wild animals, could smell fear, but they could also be cowed by confidence, even confidence that was nothing more than costume jewelry worn over insecurity. "Excuse me," Sharon announced, her voice carrying the kind of artificial sweetness that barely concealed the vinegar underneath. She positioned herself at the perfect distance to invade Judge Judy's personal space without quite touching her, a technique she'd mastered for maximum psychological effect. "I noticed you've been examining our merchandise quite thoroughly. Is there something specific you're looking for today?" Judge Judy looked up from the scarf, her legendary eyes meeting Sharon's for the first time, and for a brief moment Sharon felt something flutter in her chest, a recognition that didn't quite reach her conscious mind. But Sharon had spent so long building walls around her intuition that she dismissed the feeling as quickly as it arrived, chalking it up to the kind of nervousness that difficult customers always triggered. "I'm shopping for a graduation gift," Judge Judy replied, her voice carrying the same measured tone she used to calm nervous witnesses, completely unaware that Sharon had already cast her as the villain in a drama that existed only in Sharon's head. "Your scarves are beautiful. The craftsmanship is exceptional." But Sharon heard what she wanted to hear, filtered through years of retail cynicism and customer service trauma. Compliments were often preludes to complaints. Careful examination meant preparation for returns. Politeness was usually a mask for entitled behavior that would reveal itself the moment something didn't go exactly as the customer expected. "Yes. Well, our pieces are quite exclusive," Sharon replied, her tone shifting subtly toward territorial, like a museum guard addressing someone who'd gotten too close to a priceless painting. "We cater to a very specific clientele who appreciates luxury without requiring extensive examination." The words hung in the air between them like smoke, the insult wrapped in boutique speak but unmistakable in its intent. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly, a reaction that in her courtroom would have signaled to experienced attorneys that they were about to step on a landmine. But Sharon, drunk on her own perceived authority, missed the warning entirely. Sharon's confidence grew like a toxic plant fed by silence, interpreting Judge Judy's measured pause as submission, rather than the calm before a storm that anyone who'd spent 5 minutes in her courtroom would have recognized immediately. The manager straightened her shoulders, puffing herself up like a porcupine preparing for battle, her voice taking on the authoritative edge she reserved for what she considered problem customers. "I'm going to need to see some identification before you handle any more merchandise," Sharon announced, her words dropping into the boutique's refined atmosphere like a rock through stained glass. It was a policy that existed only in her head, born from years of power fantasies and retail paranoia, but she delivered it with the confidence of someone citing federal law. Judge Judy's hand, still holding the silk scarf, went perfectly still, her head tilted slightly to the right, a gesture that had preceded some of the most devastating cross-examinations in television history. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked, her voice carrying the kind of dangerous quiet that seasoned attorneys learned to fear. "Store policy," Sharon lied smoothly, doubling down on her fabricated authority with the skill of someone who'd been bending truth to fit convenience for years. "For expensive items, we require identification to ensure our customers can afford what they're touching." The insult landed like a slap, but Judge Judy absorbed it with the grace of someone who'd weathered far worse storms than a delusional retail manager drunk on imaginary power. Her legendary composure held firm, but behind her eyes, The wheels of justice were already turning, calculating, measuring Sharon's actions against the scales of professional conduct and basic human decency. "That's an interesting policy," Judge Judy replied, her tone so neutral it was almost clinical. "I'd like to speak with your owner about it." The words were a lifeline, a chance for Sharon to step back from the cliff she was approaching, but Sharon was too intoxicated by her own perceived dominance to recognize the offer for what it was. "The owner isn't here, and I have full authority to enforce store policies," Sharon snapped, her voice rising just enough to catch the attention of other shoppers who began turning their heads like wildlife-sensing predators. "If you can't comply with simple requests, perhaps this isn't the right store for you." Judge Judy set the scarf down with the careful precision of someone placing evidence in a courtroom, her movements deliberate and controlled. 30 years of dealing with litigants who thought they could intimidate her had taught her that the loudest voices usually belonged to the weakest minds, and Sharon was proving that theorem with every syllable. "Ma'am," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention, "I suggest you reconsider your approach." It was a warning wrapped in politeness, a final opportunity for Sharon to recognize she was steering directly into an iceberg that would sink more than just her afternoon. But Sharon, blinded by retail righteousness and years of unchecked small-scale tyranny, heard only defiance where she expected surrender. Her face flushed with the kind of anger that comes from having your authority questioned by someone you've already dismissed as beneath you. "That's it," Sharon declared, her voice now loud enough to echo off the boutique's expensive walls. "I'm officially banning you from this store. You need to leave immediately or I'm calling security." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, sealing Sharon's fate with the finality of a judge's gavel. She had no idea she'd just declared war on one of the most formidable legal minds in America. The boutique fell silent except for the soft jazz that now sounded like a funeral dirge. Every other customer frozen in place like witnesses to a car accident they couldn't look away from. Sharon stood there, chest heaving with righteous indignation, waiting for Judge Judy to slink away in defeat like every other customer she'd bullied over the years. But Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she did something that sent ice through Sharon's veins. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile or a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just watched their opponent walk directly into a trap of their own making. The expression of a predator who'd been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Judge Judy reached into her purse with the deliberate care of a surgeon selecting an instrument, her movements so controlled they seemed choreographed. "You want to see identification?" Judge Judy asked, her voice carrying a strange new energy that made the hair on Sharon's arm stand up without her understanding why. She pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal not just a driver's license, but a business card that caught the boutique's expensive lighting like a beacon. Sharon's eyes fell on the card, and for a moment, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. The seal of the Superior Court of California. The name printed in bold professional letters. The Honorable Judge Judith Scheindlin. And below that, in smaller text that might as well have been written in fire, Television's Judge Judy. "Oh, God," Sharon whispered, the words escaping her lips like air from a punctured balloon. The color drained from her face so quickly she looked like she might faint, her hand instinctively reaching for the counter to steady herself as the full magnitude of her mistake crashed over her like a tsunami. Judge Judy watched Sharon's recognition dawn with the patience of someone who'd witnessed this exact moment of realization thousands of times in her courtroom, that precise instant when a defendant realized they just confessed to something they could never take back. "That's Judge Judy to you," she said, her voice now carrying the full weight of 3 decades of judicial authority. The boutique erupted in whispers as other customers finally connected the dots, smartphones appearing like magic as people realized they were witnessing something that would be trending on social media within minutes. Sharon stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, her earlier confidence evaporating faster than expensive perfume in desert heat. Can you imagine the look on Karen's face when she realized she'd just tried to ban one of America's most famous judges from a store? If you're enjoying this instant karma story, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Judge Judy's shoes. I didn't," Sharon stammered, but Judge Judy held up a hand with the authority of someone who'd silenced courtrooms full of arguing attorneys. "No," Judge Judy said, her voice now carrying the full power that had made her a household name. "You didn't think." And that's exactly the problem. The chime of the boutique's door announced the arrival of Michael Chen, the owner, who'd been summoned by a frantic text from his assistant manager, witnessing the confrontation from across the store. He walked through the door expecting to mediate a routine customer complaint. But the scene that greeted him was his absolute worst nightmare come to life. Judge Judy stood in the center of his boutique like the eye of a hurricane, surrounded by gawking customers with their phones out, while his store manager looked like she'd just been struck by lightning. Michael's face went white as recognition hit him instantly. He'd watched Judge Judy's show religiously, had even used her quotes in staff meetings about fairness and accountability. "Your Honor," Michael breathed, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached with the reverence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. "I'm so incredibly sorry. Whatever happened here, please know it doesn't represent my business or my values." Sharon found her voice, desperation making her bold. "Michael," she was being difficult, examining everything, asking too many questions. "I was just following protocol." "What protocol?" Michael's voice cut through her excuses like a blade, his eyes blazing with a fury Sharon had never seen before. "The protocol where we humiliate customers? The protocol where we demand ID for shopping? There is no such protocol, Sharon." Judge Judy watched the exchange with the clinical interest of someone who'd observed hundreds of similar breakdowns in her courtroom. "Your manager banned me from your store," she said simply, letting the words hang in the air like an executioner's sentence. Michael's head snapped toward Sharon, disbelief and horror warring across his features. "You did what?" His voice cracked with the weight of realizing his reputation was disintegrating in real time. She wouldn't comply with..." Sharon's words trailed off as she finally understood that every excuse she offered only dug her grave deeper. "You're fired," Michael said, the words falling like a judge's gavel. "Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out." He turned back to Judge Judy, his hands shaking. "Your Honor, I cannot begin to express how mortified I am." Sharon stood there, watching 15 years of retail tyranny collapse in 15 seconds, finally understanding that actions have consequences and some mistakes can never be undone. Within hours, the story had spread across social media like wildfire, with hashtags like Judge Judy's Karen and Retail Karma Justice trending nationwide. The video footage captured by bystanders showed every devastating moment of Sharon's meltdown. From her arrogant demands to her mortified realization, to her final walk of shame past the very customer she'd spent years intimidating. The internet, with its infinite appetite for justice served cold, devoured every frame. Judge Judy, never one to let a teachable moment slip by, used her platform to address the deeper issues the incident had exposed. "This wasn't about me being recognized," she explained in interviews that week. "This was about a pattern of behavior that happens every day to people who don't have cameras rolling." How many customers has Sharon treated this way? How many people have been humiliated, dismissed, or banned from stores simply because someone on a power trip decided they didn't belong? The ripple effects spread far beyond one boutique in Beverly Hills. Retail workers across the country began sharing their own stories of managers who'd turned customer service into customer persecution, who'd confused authority with authoritarianism. Training consultants found themselves fielding calls from store owners suddenly concerned about their staff's approach to customer relations. Michael Chen didn't stop at firing Sharon. He implemented comprehensive retraining for his entire staff, brought in customer service experts, and established clear protocols that emphasized respect and professionalism. "Judge Judy taught me that you can't build a luxury brand on the foundation of making people feel small," he told reporters. "True luxury is making every customer feel valued, regardless of how they look or what you think they can afford." But perhaps the most powerful impact came from the conversations the incident sparked. Parents used Sharon's downfall to teach their children about treating service workers with respect. Managers in industries far beyond retail began examining their own practices, asking themselves whether they were building up their teams or creating little tyrants drunk on borrowed authority. Sharon herself became a cautionary tale, her name forever linked to the consequences of unchecked arrogance. Job interviews became exercises in explaining her viral moment of poor judgment, each potential employer having already seen the footage that ended her retail career in spectacular fashion. The boutique thrived under its new culture of genuine respect, proving that treating customers with dignity wasn't just the right thing to do, it was good business. Judge Judy's granddaughter eventually received her graduation gift from Meridian Boutique, purchased during a return visit, where every staff member treated the judge with the respect she'd always deserved, not because of her fame but because that's how every customer should be treated. 3 months later, Judge Judy walked back into Meridian Boutique, this time greeted by name and treated with the warmth reserved for valued customers. Michael personally assisted her, sharing how the incident had transformed not just his business but his entire approach to leadership. The boutique now thrived with a culture where respect flowed both ways, to customers and from customers to staff. Sharon's replacement, Maria, had been trained in the new protocols that emphasized dignity over dominance. The store's reviews had skyrocketed, with customers praising the genuine hospitality they encountered. What had started as one woman's power trip had inadvertently created a blueprint for how retail should operate. Judge Judy purchased the silk scarf that had started it all, wrapping it for her granddaughter with the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the universe delivers justice in the most unexpected ways. As she left the store, she reflected on a truth she'd learned over decades on the bench. Respect isn't earned through fear or intimidation. It's built through consistency, fairness, and treating every person as if their dignity matters. The lesson wasn't just about recognizing celebrities or avoiding viral embarrassment. It was about recognizing humanity itself. Every person who walks through your door, whether it's a store, an office, or your own home, deserves basic respect regardless of what you think they can afford or contribute. You don't need a gavel or a TV show to stand up for what's right. Share this video if you believe in treating people with dignity, no matter who you think they are. Remember, in Judge Judy's own words, beauty fades, dumb is forever. But respect and kindness never go out of style. What's your take on the situation? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, you never know who's watching when you think no one important is around. What you're about to see will shock you to your core. A store manager named Karen didn't just refuse Judge Judy's return. She committed a felony on camera and thought she'd never get caught. The security footage we obtained reveals Karen had been running a theft ring targeting elderly customers for over 6 months, stealing thousands of dollars. But when she tried to scam TV's toughest judge, everything came crashing down in the most spectacular way imaginable. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday afternoon at Megamart. Judge Judy Scheindlin walked through the automatic doors, receipt in hand, carrying a defective coffee maker she'd bought just yesterday. The 81-year-old television icon had no idea she was about to expose the biggest retail fraud scheme in the store's history. She approached customer service, where Karen Mitchell, a 34-year-old store manager with dead eyes and a fake smile, stood behind the counter like a predator waiting for prey. Judge Judy placed the coffee maker on the counter with her receipt clearly visible. "I'd like to return this, please. It doesn't work." Karen barely glanced at the receipt before shaking her head with practiced arrogance. "Sorry, we can't accept this return. Store policy." Judge Judy's eyebrows raised slightly. She'd heard that tone before in her courtroom from liars and thieves. "Excuse me? I have the receipt right here. I bought this yesterday." Karen's response would haunt her for the rest of her life. "I don't care who you think you are, lady." The answer is no. She didn't recognize the woman standing before her. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the most feared judge in America. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed to steel. The temperature in the store seemed to drop 10 degrees. Other customers started turning their heads, sensing something big was about to happen. But Karen wasn't done digging her own grave. "Maybe try shopping somewhere that matches your budget next time," she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The insult echoed through the store. Phones started coming out, cameras started rolling, and Judge Judy, the woman who delivered justice for over 25 years, felt that familiar fire ignite in her chest. Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her criminal career. If you think Judge Judy was about to let this slide, you clearly don't know Judge Judy. Smash that like button, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. And hit subscribe, because this takedown is about to become legendary. You won't want to miss a single second of how America's toughest judge destroys a criminal who thought she was untouchable. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. 25 years of dealing with liars had taught her that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. Instead, she did something that made Karen's blood run cold. She smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the smile of a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. "Young lady," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd rendered over 12,000 verdicts, "I suggest you get your manager." Karen's fake confidence cracked for just a moment before her arrogance roared back to life. "I am the manager, Grandma, and I'm telling you, no returns." She crossed her arms and leaned back, thinking she'd won. The customers around them gasped audibly. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Did she just call Judge Judy Grandma?" Karen had no idea she'd just insulted a woman who'd made millionaires tremble in her courtroom. Judge Judy reached into her purse, but not for money or identification. She pulled out a small leather notebook, the same one she'd used to take notes during her most famous cases. "What's your full name?" she asked, pen poised. Karen laughed mockingly. "Why? You gonna report me to corporate? Good luck with that." Judge Judy's pen didn't stop moving. Karen Mitchell, store manager, approximately 5'4", brown hair, aggressive attitude toward elderly customers. Karen's laughter died in her throat. The crowd was growing larger. A teenage employee named Marcus, who'd been watching from the electronics section, felt his stomach drop. He knew exactly what Karen had been doing to elderly customers, but he'd been too scared to speak up. Now watching Judge Judy methodically document everything, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Karen noticed the crowd and decided to double down on her power trip. Everybody back to shopping. Nothing to see here except an old lady who can't follow simple store policies. Judge Judy looked up from her notebook with laser focus. Store policies. Interesting. Could you please show me where in your official policy manual it states that valid receipts from yesterday can be refused? Karen's face flushed red. I don't have to show you anything. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security. Judge Judy's response sent chills through the watching crowd. Please do, I'd love to speak with security. In fact, I'd love to speak with everyone. That's when Karen made her second fatal mistake. She grabbed the intercom microphone and announced to the entire store, Security to customer service. We have a difficult customer causing a disturbance. Her voice carried through every aisle, alerting everyone in the building that something big was happening. Within minutes, curious shoppers began migrating toward customer service like witnesses drawn to a courthouse. Judge Judy used the time to do what she did best, investigate. She turned to an elderly woman standing nearby with a walker. Excuse me, dear. Have you ever tried to return anything to this store? The woman's eyes filled with tears. Last week, she, pointing at Karen, took my money and said my receipt was fake. I lost $87. Judge Judy's jaw tightened. Another customer, a middle-aged man holding his teenage daughter's hand, stepped forward. Same thing happened to my mother 3 months ago. We thought it was just bad luck. Karen was watching this impromptu investigation with growing panic. She reached for her phone to text someone, but Judge Judy's sharp eyes caught the movement. Texting for backup? Or perhaps warning someone? Judge Judy's courtroom instincts were in full gear now. She could smell deception like a bloodhound, and Karen reeked of it. Security finally arrived. 2 guards who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The older guard, a man named Robert who'd been working retail security for 15 years, immediately recognized Judge Judy. His eyes went wide. The younger guard, fresh out of training, looked confused about why everyone was staring at 2 women arguing over a coffee maker. Robert whispered to his partner, That's Judge Judy Scheindlin, the TV judge. The younger guard's mouth fell open. Karen pointed dramatically at Judge Judy. Arrest her. She's disturbing the peace and harassing customers. Judge Judy looked at the security guards with the same expression she'd used on defendants who just perjured themselves. Gentlemen, before you do anything, I suggest you review your security cameras. I have a feeling they'll tell a very interesting story about what's really been happening in this store. The older guard's radio crackled to life. It was the store's district manager, who'd been contacted by multiple customers calling corporate headquarters. Robert, whatever's happening down there, handle it carefully. We're getting calls from the media. Karen's face went white. Judge Judy's smile returned. The real show was just beginning. What happened next turned a simple return dispute into a full criminal investigation. Judge Judy didn't wait for permission. She'd spent decades exposing lies, and Karen's story had more holes than Swiss cheese. While security stood frozen, unsure whether to arrest a beloved TV icon, Judge Judy began conducting what could only be described as an impromptu courtroom session, right there in Megamart. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Judy announced to the growing crowd, her voice carrying the same authority that had commanded television audiences for over 2 decades. We have what appears to be a pattern of fraud targeting elderly customers. I'm going to need witnesses. Hands shot up around the store like eager students. Karen's panic was visible now, sweat beading on her forehead as she realized her victims were no longer silent. The first witness was Dorothy, an 83-year-old grandmother who stepped forward with her walker. 3 weeks ago, I tried to return a toaster that caught fire. She, pointing at Karen, told me my receipt was fake and kept my money, $43. Judge Judy's expression darkened. Did you have your receipt? Dorothy nodded, pulling a carefully preserved paper from her purse. I keep everything organized. My late husband taught me that. Judge Judy examined the receipt under the store's fluorescent lights. It was clearly legitimate, with Megamart's official watermark and valid transaction codes. She held it up for everyone to see. This receipt is authentic. Karen, would you like to explain why you told Mrs. Dorothy it was fake? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It looked suspicious. The second witness was even more damning. A middle-aged nurse named Patricia stepped forward holding her phone. I recorded our interaction last month when she refused my mother's return. The audio is clear. She played the recording on speaker for everyone to hear. Karen's voice, dripping with condescension, filled the store. Old people always lose their receipts and then blame us. No return, no refund. Security! The crowd gasped audibly. Judge Judy's eyes blazed with righteous fury. So this is a pattern. Karen, in my courtroom, we call this systematic fraud. She turned to the security guards. I strongly suggest you review your surveillance footage from the past 6 months. Focus on elderly customers at the return counter. That's when Marcus, the teenage employee who'd been watching in horror, found his courage. His hands shaking, he approached Judge Judy. Your Honor, I know where she keeps them. Judge Judy's attention locked onto him like a laser. Keeps what, son? Marcus's voice trembled. The receipts. She keeps a box of receipts from elderly customers in her office. She told us they were fake, but... Karen lunged toward Marcus. Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. But Robert, the older security guard, stepped between them. His years of experience told him this situation was about to explode, and he wasn't about to let a potential criminal intimidate a witness. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. Judge Judy placed a protective hand on Marcus's shoulder. Continue, young man. You're safe here. Marcus took a deep breath. She has a system. When elderly customers come in, she looks for any excuse to keep their money. Faded receipts, slight damage to items, anything. Then she processes the returns after they leave and pockets the refunds. The store fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Karen's elaborate theft scheme was unraveling in real time. Judge Judy turned to the security guards with the same intensity she'd used to corner lying defendants. Gentlemen, I believe we need to examine that office immediately, and I suspect your security cameras will show some very interesting patterns. Karen made one last desperate play. This is harassment. You can't just accuse me without evidence. Judge Judy's response was ice cold. Young lady, I've been collecting evidence for the past 10 minutes. And from what I can see, you've been running a criminal enterprise targeting the most vulnerable members of our society. That ends today. The store's atmosphere shifted dramatically when the automatic doors burst open, and District Manager David Hernandez stormed in, his face flushed from sprinting across the parking lot. He'd received 17 phone calls in the past 20 minutes, including one from the local news station and another from Megamart's corporate legal department. What he found was his worst nightmare. A crowd of customers surrounding his store manager and America's most famous judge in what looked like a criminal investigation. What in God's name is happening here? David demanded, his voice echoing through the store. Judge Judy turned toward him with the measured grace of someone accustomed to commanding authority. Mr. Hernandez, I presume? Your store manager has been systematically defrauding elderly customers. I suggest you review your security footage immediately before this becomes a federal investigation. Karen seized the moment, rushing to David's side like a child running to a parent. David, thank God you're here. This crazy old woman is harassing me and disrupting our customers. She's making wild accusations because I followed store policy and refused her return. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched dangerously high. Karen had just called her crazy on top of everything else. David looked around at the crowd of witnesses, his trained retail eye immediately recognizing a public relations disaster in the making. Dorothy stepped forward, clutching her walker and her authentic receipt. Young man, that manager of yours stole $43 from me 3 weeks ago. This wonderful lady is helping us get justice. David's stomach dropped as he realized the scope of what might be happening. Judge Judy didn't wait for corporate bureaucracy to slow things down. Mr. Hernandez, I'm requesting immediate access to your security system and Karen's office. Marcus here has provided testimony about evidence stored in that office. She gestured to the teenage employee, who was now standing straighter, emboldened by having the most famous judge in America as his backup. Karen's desperation reached new heights. David, you know me. I've been Employee of the Month 6 times. I would never steal from customers. Her voice cracked on the word steal, and Judge Judy caught it immediately. Years of courtroom experience had taught her to spot the exact moment when someone's lies began crumbling under pressure. David made the call that would change everything. Robert, take us to the security office now. As they walked toward the back of the store, Karen grabbed David's arm with trembling hands. You don't understand. She's trying to destroy me because I wouldn't break policy for her. This is all about her ego. The security office was cramped and filled with monitors showing every angle of the store. Robert pulled up the footage from 3 weeks ago, the day Dorothy had attempted her return. What they saw on screen made David's blood run cold. Crystal clear footage showed Karen taking Dorothy's receipt, examining it and then hiding it under the counter while telling the elderly woman it was fake. But the cameras captured something even more damning. After Dorothy left heartbroken and empty-handed, Karen retrieved the receipt, processed the return on the computer, and pocketed the cash refund. The theft was caught in high definition from 3 different angles. My God, David whispered. Judge Judy's expression was granite. Keep watching. I suspect this isn't an isolated incident. They fast-forwarded through weeks of footage and the pattern became undeniable. Karen had perfected her system. Elderly customers, authentic receipts, fake refusals, followed by secret processing and theft. The cameras had captured everything. Her greed, her lies, her systematic targeting of vulnerable seniors who were unlikely to fight back. Karen stood frozen as her months of criminal activity played out on screen. She tried one last desperate lie. The cameras must be malfunctioning. This footage has been doctored. Judge Judy turned to face her with the same expression she'd worn when delivering guilty verdicts to the worst defendants in her courtroom. Karen, I've heard every excuse imaginable in 25 years of jurisprudence. What we're looking at is crystal clear evidence of systematic theft, elder abuse, and fraud. Mr. Hernandez, I strongly recommend you contact law enforcement immediately. David was already reaching for his phone, his hands shaking as he realized his store had been harboring a criminal operation. The walls were closing in on Karen, and everyone in that security room knew it. Her criminal empire was about to collapse, and there was nowhere left to run. What happened next will go down as one of the most devastating takedowns in retail history. As David dialed 911 with trembling fingers, Karen's carefully constructed world began imploding in spectacular fashion. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. She had one more devastating revelation that would expose just how deep Karen's criminal operation really went. Mr. Hernandez, before the police arrive, I suggest you check Karen's employee records for the past 6 months. Specifically, look for any unexplained cash discrepancies or inventory adjustments. Judge Judy's tone carried the weight of someone who'd solved thousands of cases. David's face went pale as he pulled up Karen's access logs on the computer system. The numbers were staggering. Over $12,000 in unauthorized cash withdrawals, disguised as customer service adjustments, and damaged inventory write-offs. Each entry corresponded perfectly with dates when elderly customers had been turned away. Karen hadn't just been stealing refund money, she'd been systematically looting the store's cash registers using her managerial access codes. Karen's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her face drained of all color as the magnitude of her crimes became undeniable. I can explain, she whispered, but her voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. Judge Judy stepped closer, her presence filling the small security office like an avenging angel. Young lady, in my courtroom, I've seen embezzlers, con artists, and thieves of every variety. But what you've done targeting elderly people who trusted you, that's not just theft. That's predatory behavior of the worst kind. Judge Judy's words cut through Karen like a blade. You didn't just steal money. You stole their dignity, their confidence, their faith in basic human decency. Marcus, the teenage employee who'd found his courage, spoke up with new information that made everyone's blood run cold. There's more. She made us lie to customers, too. If anyone complained about her, she threatened to fire us and make sure we couldn't get jobs anywhere else. She said she had connections. Judge Judy's expression darkened further. Witness intimidation, conspiracy. Karen, you've been running a criminal enterprise. The sound of sirens grew louder outside as police cars pulled into the parking lot. Through the security monitors, they could see news vans arriving as word of the confrontation spread through social media. Videos of Judge Judy's impromptu investigation had already gone viral, with millions watching the drama unfold in real time. Detective Sarah Martinez entered the store with 2 uniformed officers, immediately recognizing Judge Judy from television. Your Honor, we received reports of theft and fraud. What's the situation? Judge Judy gestured toward the monitors still displaying Karen's crimes. Detective, we have documented evidence of systematic elder abuse, embezzlement, and fraud totaling over $12,000. Karen made one final pathetic attempt to save herself. Tears streaming down her face, she looked at Judge Judy with desperate eyes. Please, I'm sorry. I have student loans, medical bills, my mother needs care. I never meant for it to go this far. It was the classic criminal's defense, personal hardship justifying victimizing others. Judge Judy's response was swift and merciless. Karen, I've heard every sob story imaginable. Financial pressure doesn't give you the right to prey on elderly people who worked their entire lives for the money you stole. Dorothy is 83 years old. That $43 you took might have been her medication money. The detective began reading Karen her rights as the handcuffs clicked into place. But Judge Judy wasn't done delivering justice. She turned to David with the authority of someone accustomed to issuing orders that changed lives. Mr. Hernandez, every single victim needs to be contacted and fully compensated. This store needs to implement new policies to protect elderly customers immediately. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she turned back one last time, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. Judge Judy's reply echoed through the store for everyone to hear. Sorry doesn't undo the harm you've caused, but maybe your arrest will prevent the next Karen from thinking she can get away with targeting vulnerable people. The crowd of customers who had witnessed everything burst into spontaneous applause. Dorothy, the elderly woman who'd started it all by sharing her story, wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, Judge Judy, you gave us our voices back. Hold up right there. If you're as amazed as we are by Judge Judy's incredible takedown of this criminal, smash that like button right now, hit subscribe because justice stories like this don't happen every day, and drop a comment telling us what you think Karen's punishment should be. Because what happens next will restore your faith in the justice system. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, Megamart Corporate issued a public apology and established a special fund to compensate every victim of Karen's scheme. Dorothy received her $43 back, plus interest and a formal letter of apology. Judge Judy personally ensured each elderly victim was contacted and treated with the dignity they deserved. Karen pled guilty to multiple felony charges including embezzlement, elder abuse, and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. The courtroom was packed with her victims who finally had their day in justice. Judge Judy attended the sentencing, sitting quietly in the gallery, her presence a reminder that sometimes heroes emerge in the most unexpected places. Megamart revolutionized their return policy, implementing new protections for elderly customers and mandatory sensitivity training for all employees. Marcus was promoted to assistant manager and became the poster child for standing up to workplace corruption. The store installed a special senior customer advocate position to ensure no elderly shopper would ever face Karen's treatment again. Judge Judy's simple trip to return a coffee maker had transformed an entire corporation's culture and protected countless future victims from predatory behavior. The ripple effects of Judge Judy's courage spread across the nation like wildfire. Her story inspired elderly customers everywhere to speak up against retail abuse. The Judge Judy effect became a movement, with stores nationwide implementing new protections for vulnerable shoppers. Karen's arrest made headlines from coast to coast, serving as a warning to anyone who thought they could prey on the elderly. Dorothy, now 84, became a local hero in her community, speaking at senior centers about standing up for yourself. Judge Judy taught me that age doesn't mean we have to accept being mistreated, she told audiences who hung on every word. Marcus started a nonprofit helping retail workers report workplace corruption, directly inspired by Judge Judy's example of fearless justice. 6 months later, Judge Judy returned to that same Megamart. The new manager, a kind woman named Grace, personally handled her return with a smile. "Thank you for what you did," Grace whispered. "You saved this place." Judge Judy simply nodded. Justice isn't just in the courtroom. Sometimes it's in the coffee maker aisle. If Judge Judy's incredible courage inspired you to stand up for what's right, smash that like button to keep fighting injustice everywhere. Subscribe so you never miss stories of everyday heroes getting the justice they deserve. And comment below telling us about a time you witnessed someone standing up for others, or when you found the courage to speak up yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to see that one person can make a difference and that bullies never win when good people refuse to stay silent. Because right now you're not just a viewer. You're part of the movement that says enough is enough to criminals who think they can prey on the vulnerable. Together we're building a world where justice isn't just on TV. It's everywhere good people choose to make a stand.